Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's joint webinar with Tricentis and Nous Infosystems on how to use the right tool for test automation. My name is Sindhu, and I will be your host for the day. Before we begin our session, I would like to inform you that you can type in your questions during the webinar, and we'll try and answer those at the end of the session. In this session, we will talk about various Tricentis test automation tools such as Tosca, TestIM, TTA, etc. And we'll discuss what is unique about each of these products and what criteria you can apply to decide which is the best fit for your organization. Today, Bill Hayden and Jane Iyer to take us through the webinar. Bill Hayden is an accomplished professional with over 25 years of experience in strategic client relationship management, IT quality, development operations, and leading mentoring others. Bill now serves as a senior solution architect for Alliance at Tricentis, the industry-leading continuous testing platform provider. Prior to his current position, his oversaw engagement management and services delivery for some of the largest customers of multiple software reseller and consulting organizations. In addition, Bill also built and led the professional services and resource enablement divisions for these same groups. He is known for his exceptional interpersonal skills, adopting creative solutions against business challenges and process execution. Jay Nair is Senior Vice President and Head of Testry, the software testing division of Nous Infosystems. Over his career of 30 years, he has set up, led, and grown large IT outsourcing engagements for application development, testing, and production support. His strong expertise in quality and reliability stems from his work in the aerospace industry during the first 9 years of his career. He has been a strategic advisor to top management across multiple industries on quality, testing, agile practices, and metrics, as well as a practitioner of these disciplines. He has spoken and written about these in various forums. He has helped companies from startups to the largest multinational enterprises achieve their business goals by reliably and efficiently building, deploying, and running technology solutions with quality. I will now turn the time over to Bill to take us through the Tricentis introduction.
Thank you so much for that invite, and thank you everyone for being here today with us. And I'm not used to hearing that much information about myself, so thank you all for going through my last 25 years. I started in this business back in the build up to Y2K, if you can believe that. And I've seen a lot of changes that we have gone through as an industry, particularly when it comes to software testing in general and automation in particular. And what I saw at Tricentis a few years ago excited me to the point where I knew I had to be part of this team. So let me introduce you to Tricentis and tell you a little bit about who we are. First of all, back in 2008, our founder, Wolfgang Plotz, realized that a continuous test automation approach was necessary to keep up with the pace of change that we were seeing in all the environments that we were attempting to test. Now, that was 15 years ago. Think about how much faster things are today. Some studies say that up to 69% have accelerated additional business initiatives, especially coming out of COVID. I personally think it's a little bit higher than that. So what does acceleration mean in terms of getting products to market? It means we cannot sacrifice quality for speed. In fact, if you talk to most CIOs or any group of CIOs, they'll tell you that the number one barrier to speed is still testing. Now, how do we reverse that? how do we change testing from being the barrier to being a force multiplier? It requires a brand new approach and a brand new paradigm when it comes to testing in general and automation in particular. And Wolfgang's vision for this was to inject efficiencies into every step of the process so that we could build a true continuous testing platform and hence deliver quality software faster. And the key to doing this is maintainability and keeping up with the pace of change in software. We need to spend more time running our test automation than fixing it, because these are the results that our customers realize when they do. 10 times faster release cycles, 40% cost reduction, and to me, one of the most exciting, 90% maintainable risk coverage in our test automation. So today we're going to walk you through various components of the Tricentis continuous test automation platform and share with you some of the newer ideas and newer innovations that we've just recently released as well.
Thank you, Bill. Jay here. Welcome, everybody. Let's talk a little bit about Nous. We have been in the business of helping customers deploy and deliver leading edge technology solutions to win in the market for more than 25 years. And Testry is our testing division. We have three divisions. Global Software Services is our application development and product engineering group, and then Testry, the testing division, and vServe is our infrastructure management group. We are a global company with our customers based across almost all of the continents, and we have dedicated centers of competency for the areas where our clients need the most help, and these include areas like cloud, analytics, RPA, testing, and so on. In the area of testing, we are not just an organization that provides services. We help many clients implement strategies for testing and really bring together the best of technology, the right process, and the team, the organizational structure to make testing as efficient and effective as you possibly can. And our partnerships with the leading vendors of technology solutions like Tricentis help us bring the best of both worlds for our clients. And no doubt, we have been able to have long-standing clients across multiple industries and a very high customer satisfaction rating across the board. Now, our partnership with Tricentis is highly valued within Nous and for our customers. We are a Tosca implementation partner, and we are one of the preferred delivery service partners for Tricentis. We have a dedicated center of competency that helps our teams develop high proficiency in the solutions of Tricentis, and this helps us deliver with the highest level of quality to our common clients. So today, the big question is, why are there so many testing tools? If you think about the automation tools that are there in the market today, there are hundreds of them. There are so many open source tools, commercial tools, many of them are programming based. And in recent years, we have seen the emergence of many tools that leverage really cutting edge technology like AI and ML to really take testing to the next level. Why do we need all these tools? That's a question we'll debate right now. So think about what really happens in the modern enterprise in terms of a context for testing. I'm sure you'll all agree that stakeholder expectations, the expectations of the consumers, the customers of businesses, and also employees are very high. We have all been really spoiled by the latest technology advances that's happening around us. And so the expectations from the quality of service, as well as the quality of the systems that are used to deliver that service, is very high. And so companies have to change at a very rapid pace in order to keep up with these high expectations and also to keep up with competition. And the at least over the short term, the economic environment isn't helping either. Every business is really working hard to make sure that they survive and thrive in these very difficult times. So this is the context in which testing actually happens in the modern enterprise. Now, how do businesses respond to this? Digital transformation was a thing even 10 years back. However, the pandemic changed all of it in the sense that transformation initiatives that used to take months and years have to be completed in much less than a year these days. And you are talking about supporting the business using technologies that have become increasingly complex. The way you deliver your services to your customers is multi-channel these days. A lot of people are using mobile devices, their phones, tablets, in addition to the laptops and desktops to consume your services. Your systems are most likely exposing APIs to others who can develop solutions around yours, or connect to your systems and have integrated user journeys for your customers. Cloud is widely adopted, and so there is a combination of cloud-based and on-premise systems in your environment. Many businesses are moving towards a SaaS world, software as a service solutions have become so popular. At the same time, there are still many companies that have significant amounts of bespoke applications in the mix. System architectures have become so distributed. It's hard to really pinpoint where some of the components of your systems are and who owns them. Interconnectedness between systems, interoperability, all of these become really important aspects to consider when you build your test strategy and your solutions. And not to say the least, the explosion of data makes it really a challenge when you think about having the right test data for your systems. So having to manage these large volumes of data in testing is itself a challenge. So it's very complex. It's a very complex environment in which testing is done in enterprises these days. So in summary, the complexity has increased. The time you have to complete your testing has gone down. And you are always under pressure to do more with less. So budgets are going down, or maybe remaining stable or going down. The workload on your team is increasing. And overall, the business risk from the changes you are making to your application is going up because of all these factors. So now, how do you deal with all this? Automation is key because automation helps you speed up your work and reduce the possibility of errors and reduces dependency on large numbers of people to get the work done. So the challenges are increasing, so are the opportunities for innovation. Let's talk a little bit more about that. So think about the ways in which businesses are responding to the environment they're operating in these days. Almost all of the successful businesses are adopting lean and agile practices to manage, to build systems and keep up with the pace of the market. DevOps used to be a buzzword a couple of years back, but it's no longer the case. It's a key enabler for business success. In terms of architectures, microservices and cloud native are really helping businesses build really robust, scalable, high-value systems that will help them deliver their services to the market. SaaS, as I said before, is very much entrenched in the strategy, IT strategy of companies. Containerization, these kind of technologies are helping companies establish immutable infrastructures to further make their releases more flexible and helps them reduce their time to market. And enabling all of that is actually everything as code. Infrastructure as code, for example, helps you define your environments, your infrastructure in code, and then be able to instantiate that at will. At the same time, low code is also gaining force. So why do you want your people to have to deal with hundreds or thousands or millions of lines of code to build your systems if they can instead operate at a much higher level using cutting edge technology so that your teams can really focus on the business need that they're trying to solve and not writing large amounts of code. Artificial intelligence and machine learning are really transforming the way, disrupting the way we live, and also the way software applications are being built and tested. So all of these afford opportunities as well to really innovate in testing. Today, companies have to test more than ever before, more often than ever before. There are many companies that are able to release changes to their systems multiple times during the day. So you have to test more and you have to test faster. Your developers are not going to wait for hours for your regression test to run and give them the results. And of course, you have to do all of this while actually finding those bugs. And that itself is really challenging because of the complexities of systems. As you increase your speed and the frequency of testing, you also have to make sure that your testing is effective in finding all those bugs. And of course, you always have to do all of this at ever smaller budgets. So we strongly believe in the idea of continuous testing. This is really about establishing a continuous feedback loop on quality throughout the life cycle of your systems, right from the time business and IT start talking about the next new big feature or capability that they want to bring to the market, all the way through this to analyzing the requirements, the user stories, grooming the user stories, building your backlog, building the design, the architecture and the design, and then of course during coding and testing and deployment and delivery and then in operations. So establishing that continuous feedback loop will help make sure that if there are issues, you are able to find them early on and overall really reduce the cost of software development, increase your ability to move fast at the pace of business, and do all of this with high quality. And continuous testing is possible only with automation. And just looking at this scenarios, the complexity, the variety of systems that have been tested, the many different situations that companies find themselves in, the sizes of companies, the unique aspects of their business means that you just cannot have one size fits all. That's not how it works. You really have to have solutions that are really aligned to the needs and constraints of the company. And that is why there are so many tools out there. So the question is, how do you select the right one for you? And it may not always be just one tool either. So let's talk about some of the most important criteria that you would want to apply when you select the right tool for automation of your testing. The bottom line is that the tool should support the application technologies. That includes your UI test, your API test, and also your data test. How well is the tool aligned to the overall strategy of your company towards quality and quality management and the culture of your company? Maybe you are an organization that that takes pride in the technology prowess of your development team. Maybe you have superstar programmers and that's all they want to do. That is, do everything in code. So then you would want a testing tool that uses a programming-based approach. On the other hand, you might be an organization that's more focused on the business value and being able to generate business value as efficiently as possible. Maybe you want a lot more people to participate in automating your test. In that case, you would want a no-code tool for the purpose. Maybe you believe in open source, or maybe it doesn't matter to you. Maybe proprietary technologies are okay for you. So all these matter when you go about selecting the right tool. And then once you have narrowed down to a certain set of candidate tools, you then want to take a closer look at those tools and then pick the right one for you. The ease of learning, the ease of use, these are really important aspects to be considered. Now, how does this tool really enhance the productivity of your testing? And you have to think about the initial test development and also the ongoing maintenance of your tests, because your tests have to always keep up with the changes in your systems. And there might be bugs. An automated test is a piece of software, and there could be bugs in it. So there is the aspect of maintainability. Now, does the tool use advanced features like machine learning to enhance the productivity of your team? The speed, the flexibility, and reliability of test execution is another important factor. There are certain open source tools that are rather infamous for their flaky tests. Now, you can develop very reliable tests using those tools, but it takes a lot of effort to do it. However, there are other tools that make it so easy for you to build and run highly reliable tests that do not fail that often. How fast your tests run. Again, like I said before, you want to run your test in your pipeline in a matter of minutes and not hours. How well does that tool integrate with other software engineering tools, CI/CD, your agile project management tools? That's the other category of tools you want to integrate with your test management tools, the collaboration tool that you use. Also, is there an enterprise class product that will scale not only to your current needs, but also to the future needs that you anticipate as your business grows? Security. Is the tool compliant with your security practices and your security controls? Now, this in particular is an aspect that many managers often do not pay attention to as they go about selecting their tool, and then sometimes they find, to their surprise at the end, that okay, there are questions being raised about the suitability of the tool from their information security team. And so this is something you want to consider early on. Now, what about the vendor? How reputed are they? Have they been in the market long enough, and are they known to be a reliable vendor of the product? What's the quality of service? If you need help, is technical service available without having to jump through hoops? And what is the vision of that vendor? What's the product ecosystem look like? Is it just a smattering of tools, or is it a well put together whole ecosystem for testing? What is the roadmap? Do you think they will keep up with times as technology evolves, as your needs evolve? Will they keep bringing new capabilities to the market? And then, very importantly, what is the total cost of ownership? So when you think about the cost, there is the cost of the licenses, there is the cost of the infrastructure that you need to have in place to be able to operate those tools, and then the productivity of the teams developing and maintaining tests using the tool. So this is not just about a license. You might have a tool, you might be considering a tool that has a high annual license fee. However, If that's compensated for and more through the increased productivity of your teams and through lower cost of infrastructure, then that will make a lot more sense for you. It would make a lot more sense for you to buy the tool in spite of the high license cost. So these are the most important criteria that you want to use to select the right tool for test automation. There could be more, but if you focus on these aspects, it will help you make the right choices. So with that, Bill, I'd like to hand over to you. Tricentis has this ecosystem that I was talking about before, a number of tools in your catalog, and they all come with very, very advanced capabilities. And we have also used many of them to help our clients with their testing needs. But there are so many of them that it can be a bit confusing for a would-be user to figure out which is the right one for them. I'd like to spend the rest of this discussion today talking about that. And you are the best person to take us through all of it. So over to you, Bill.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you for that excellent overview, particularly those characteristics of testing tools. And one thing that we're going to keep coming back to is the cultural fit. The fact that not everyone uses the same approach to testing. In fact, we have a very diverse ecosystem of skills, of experience for people who actually do use our tools. So first of all, let's take a look at a typical application landscape. Yes, next slide, please. So no application exists in a vacuum anymore. Every time I walk into an account, I see a mixture of enterprise applications, I see a mixture of home build applications, third-party callouts to external APIs, and that ever-present data flow between all those applications. So if you look at this ecosystem, you'll see that each of these bubbles is probably constantly changing. And the data flowing between each of these bubbles is constantly changing. And therefore, it has never been more complex. And multiply that by the pace of change that we're dealing with, you can see how large our testing problem has become. And also, the testing function is not just done in one area. For instance, for enterprise applications, we may see a testing center of excellence, if you will. There we are. And what's interesting to me about this is we've all seen the pendulum swing back and forth between centralized testing and distributed testing teams. And according to some recent studies that I have gone through in the last 6 months, I've seen that companies who are focused on what, instead of quality assurance, we're going to call it business assurance, are the most successful and use a hybrid model to distribute their testing workload. Enterprise teams tend to center around center of excellence type structures, and they often involve business users because the flows through an SAP, through an Oracle are so complex from a business perspective. We need the business users' input to ensure that we're testing the proper things. In fact, I've led teams before who were very, very technical and understood SAP, but because they didn't understand how SAP was configured, say for a food service distribution company, they really, really struggled in testing the right things. So these teams need an approach where we can get the input of the business user involved in our automation process and still keep up with the pace of change. Now, what does that look like? Here you see not only our flagship product, Tosca, but as I promised, a new innovation as well that we're calling Tricentis Test Automation. This was only released in January, and we're continuing to innovate with it. But the underlying principle of both Tosca and Tricentis Test Automation is a concept called model-based. In other words, these are code-less solutions. They're very visual, and therefore it is very easy for the business to give us their input on the testing process. In some cases, the business can actually help us design and create the tests. If I gave each and every person on this call a Tosca or a TTA test for, say, SAP, and you've never seen our tools before, but you were familiar with SAP, you could absolutely understand what that test is doing and therefore give us great feedback. The other big advantage that I'll talk about here in a minute to this approach is because it's codeless, that goes a very long way towards beating that maintenance problem that I alluded to earlier. So we spend more time running our automation instead of fixing it. Couple that with an intelligent machine learning auto healing capability that we introduced 2 years ago, we're further reducing that maintenance trap. And in the case of Tosca, the system works the same way across every bubble that you see on this screen. If you know how to use it on SAP, you know how to use it on mainframe. If you know how to use it on mobile, you know how to use it on a custom build web application. It supports over 170 different interfaces. Tricentis test automation will grow to that capability as it continues to mature. Right now, it's web only, but it does support that model-based testing concept. So if you're thinking about Center of Excellence doing primarily business testing, not just across a single application, but across multiple applications in this bubble, Tosca and Tricentis test automation are definitely the right cultural fit for that type of group. Now, as we've gone through the last 5 or 6 years and developed more capabilities in Tosca for systems like ServiceNow and Salesforce, we discovered that there's an entirely different persona out there doing a lot of the ServiceNow and Salesforce testing. It wasn't QA people. In a lot of cases, it wasn't developers. It was platform administrators, people who work in ServiceNow, are used to a ServiceNow IDE or a Salesforce IDE, and that's the world they want to live in. They might only be doing their testing in isolation while the Center of Excellence is doing testing across these bubbles. So we needed tooling that spoke to them and their culture and their environment. And that is where we introduced both test automation for ServiceNow and test automation for Salesforce. I'm going to go into each of these in a little more detail because I think you'll see they're based on slightly different principles, but ultimately designed to appeal to those platform administrators and development teams that are working and living in that environment. Now, to Jade's point earlier, we also have organizations that have very talented development teams. They don't necessarily embrace a low-code, no-code approach. They want to be able to continue to work in the IDEs and the languages to which they become accustomed. They tend to be very agile. They tend to move very quickly. In fact, about 11 years ago, 12 years ago, Microsoft coined the phrase software development engineer in test, or SDETs. And these are people that were using open source products where they had to code in Java, in Ruby, and other languages in order to create their API and UI level tests. Now, how do we appeal to that market? And that is where we bring in the final piece of the puzzle. I'm going to talk about our Testum product, specifically designed to appeal to the SDET persona, and yet it solves 3 very large challenges that I personally have run into with some of the larger Selenium implementations that I've overseen throughout the years. So for the rest of our time, I'm going to break down each of these and talk about how they all fit into our continuous testing platform. So as you can see, there is some overlap here. For instance, Tosca can test anything you see on this screen. It supports over 170 different interfaces, but the persona it's designed for is more what we call the business user, people who need to understand intimately what those business flows are and how the business flow operates. And Tricentis test automation is also based on that same model-based testing concept, very visual, but is a SaaS implementation, whereas Tosca is on-prem. Tricentis test automation is purely in the cloud, purely SaaS. A couple of downloadable components so it can interact with some of your more legacy technologies, but the user interface has been streamlined. We've done a tremendous amount of work on making sure that we've eliminated extra steps in the automation process as you're creating and running these tests. And of course, both will integrate with anyone's CI/CD environment. And then over on the admin and dev team side, you see Tricentis test automation for Salesforce, Tricentis test automation for ServiceNow. Now, you'll see, and you probably noticed by now, TTA is a very popular acronym here at Tricentis. It simply stands for Tricentis Test Automation. And the different flavors are, of course, Salesforce, ServiceNow. I believe you're going to see others coming in the near future for other platforms that we may have already shown on a previous slide. And then the overall model-based testing in SaaS is just test automation. And then you see that large bubble off to the right, testing, where this is appealing to people who enjoy coding in their own IDEs. So this, in our vision, tackles all the different personas who are going to be part of continuous testing. It's not just enough for the Center of Excellence to excel in continuous testing. All of these areas have to. And that's why all of this feeds into our continuous testing platform, because we want to address test automation wherever it is and overcome that fundamental principle of being able to do less testing more intelligently and running our tests more than we're fixing our tests, so we can support those high levels of coverage in a maintainable manner. And we're not having to throw a small army of people just at the maintenance aspect, because I've seen that happen. And after 3 to 4 months with, say, a wonderful Selenium suite, they simply don't have enough people to keep it up to date. Tests don't get run after 4 or 5 months, and then several defects start creeping back into production, and we wonder why. So one of the fundamental driving principles of Tricentis in general is speed changes everything. We must keep up with the pace of change, and this is how we're addressing it in the software test automation landscape. Now let's take a closer look at each of these, and we're going to start with our flagship, Tosca. This was first developed in 2008. This was Wolfgang's initial vision for taking code completely out of the equation when we were doing test automation, a visual model-based testing approach that allows us literally to build a model. Now, what is a model? For UI level testing, a model is a visual representation of a screen. For API, it is a request response pair. And for data, it might be SQL statement and the resulting data set, but all represented in a very visual way. As you can see, Tosca works at all 3 of those levels. In fact, you can unlock an additional capability of Tosca that we call data integrity testing that allows you to do continuous data pipeline testing end to end in a very monitoring and continuous manner. So if you think about the data flowing through that visual that we showed a few slides ago, imagine millions, if not billions of records are going through and changing a day. What if you had the ability to monitor that to make sure all those transformations occurred correctly, all those joins occurred correctly, particularly if you're running analytics on it? So the data layer cannot be underestimated, and the value of data testing cannot be understated. Tosca incorporates all of that in this visual model-based approach. And you'll notice the AI powered. I mentioned that we have a machine learning based self-healing capability. So if something were to change on one of your screens, odds are the AI will detect that and auto update your test, so further reducing that maintenance burden. And we also have an AI powered driver that allows us to build our automation from wireframes. We can test through Citrix interfaces and further break down those barriers. Now, Jay also referred to the importance of test data and managing that in an intelligent manner. We have an entire test data service platform built into Tosca that allows you to provision your data environments. Now, I mentioned this is aimed at your biz testers who are trying to do this manually. And that used to work when we did maybe one SAP upgrade every 6 to 12 months. But once you go to S/4HANA, those changes are going to occur much more quickly. In some cases, 57 times a quarter. Same with Oracle. You're going to be getting quarterly releases. You just can't keep up manually anymore. Tosca is really the solution to this. And at first, when I came to Tricentis, that 90% test automation coverage really jumped out at me because in my experience, we were doing good to achieve 40% coverage. Anything above that, and we were actually spending more time fixing our automation than running it. For highly agile DevOps shops who are using Selenium, sometimes that dropped as low as 20%. But these 90% numbers are referenceable, and we can refer you to customers and Nous customers who are achieving this with this approach because we've beaten that maintenance trap. And that leads to all those other benefits, the accelerated release cycles, as well as risk coverage. Notice we talk about both functional and risk coverage. At Tricentis, we like to say risk is our currency. Now, I would love to spend another webinar with you talking about how we do less testing more intelligently, but I'll save that for a later time. Oh, next slide, please. Now, let's talk about one of the other primary personas I personally work with for the last 12 years, and that is the software development engineer and test, or the dev tester, if you will. When we were looking at the market, we realized that Tosca, for all its benefits, because there is no code, sometimes made SDET teams nervous. They love to be able to code. And I've overseen some great Selenium implementations. I always say it's not Tosca or Selenium, it's Tosca and Selenium. They each have their place in the market. In fact, I've done some massive Selenium tests for some of the largest companies in the Southeast United States. But we kept running into three primary challenges whenever we would do a large Selenium implementation. First and foremost being, how much time does it take to get our first test out the door? Unless we had an established framework already built that we could drop in place, sometimes building that first test took quite some time. And then I've already alluded to the second challenge, the maintenance problem. Every time a change comes in the system, we have to update the test. So now all of a sudden you have your team spending maybe more time updating the test than actually updating the actual code. And then last but not least, being able to pull information out of my Selenium framework and into some sort of report visualization tool. In some cases, we built our own dashboards to do that. So Testim actually tackles those three challenges for the SDET. One, it has a very, very intelligent recorder that's built right into your browser that allows you to go through and capture your actions and convert those to these visual models here you see on the screen. It's not model based because behind each one of those there actually is JavaScript you can get in and manipulate. But that time to first test is massively reduced. But my favorite part is the AI-based self-healing and auto grouping that's built into this as well. Very, very similar to what we have in Tosca, but in some ways even more powerful. In fact, our Testim user base will just tell you, they have one great phrase, it just works. No matter how much the system changes, it just works. And some of the largest users of this were Microsoft and Salesforce because the AI was constantly looking for ways to update the test. And it was also recognizing that you might have these 20 steps in test 1, these same 20 steps in test 52, same 20 steps over here in test 83. It would go through and auto group that for you. Again, being able to reduce your points of maintenance intelligently and automatically really was custom built for keeping up with the pace of change. And then last but not least, that visualization layer. Very similar to our Q-Test product, there is a full insights visualization module built into Testim so that you automatically out of the box can monitor not only individual test progress, but get a holistic view of where your entire execution runs. And it'll run on anyone's Selenium grid as well. In fact, it will even automate things outside the browser. So if you have those personas that are really, really dedicated to coding, Testim is a great fit for them, and it solves three very fundamental challenges. Oh, next slide, please. Now, I'm going to jump back to the model-based concept very briefly, because we talked about that in Tosca. But what we realized is, since Tosca was initially built in 2008, it was continuing to be an on-prem solution. And more we're seeing our customer base really want SaaS-based solutions, like Testim is a SaaS-based solution. So in January of this year, we released Tricentis Test Automation that is model-based testing as a SaaS delivered model. Oh, could you go back a slide, please? So this idea of model-based testing in the cloud is really catching on with a lot of our customer base. And each week we're releasing new capabilities for TTA. Right now it is web only, but you're going to see additional drivers such as SAP. Here we are. We're right back to where we need to be. SAP testing through Tricentis test automation is going to be before the end of this year, and I really think it's going to be our flagship going forward. We're very excited about this. In fact, we have a corporate initiative to take all our tooling to a SaaS model so that you can log into one common portal, and whichever tools that you're licensed for, you have immediate access to, whether it be Tricentis test automation, whether it be our Qtest test management product, or whether it be any of the other TTA products. So look for more innovation of that in the future. Now, speaking of our other TTA products, let's talk specifically now about what we have built for the Salesforce and ServiceNow administrators. Remember I mentioned that with our Testum product, Salesforce was one of the biggest users internally. We decided to take advantage of that. Based on that technology, we've expanded it, massively customized it just for Salesforce so that we can connect to a Salesforce landscape and automatically generate a lot of the steps customized for that particular environment. It's already optimized for Lightning, and it brings all those other capabilities that I already mentioned for Testum to the fore, especially that self-healing capability. Oh, next slide, please. Now, we took a slightly different approach with ServiceNow. What we found with ServiceNow administrators is that they actually love to work in their own ServiceNow IDE. So we built TTA for ServiceNow to live within ServiceNow. It's actually part of the ServiceNow platform. And as a result, it understands conceptually and contextually how business flows are defined within ServiceNow. As a result, we can define our tests at a much higher level and auto-generate hundreds of them. In fact, if changes occur, we can regenerate the entire test suite in a matter of seconds. So keeping up with the pace of change, just in a slightly different way. You know, everything we do is all about speed and all about keeping up with the pace of change. It's designed with ServiceNow professionals in mind, and again, integrates with anyone's CI/CD release system. Next slide, please. So in summary, how do these all fit together? It all comes down to the persona and the culture of the team that is actually doing the testing and doing the automation. In some cases, these teams never knew they even had an automation capability on the market that would make their lives easier. We talked a little bit before about how a lot of those enterprise testing teams are still doing things manually. And that's where Tosca comes in. Being able to address the center of excellence, being able to address those business applications where you're testing not the application in isolation, but across multiple applications. Maybe it's an SAP to a Blue Yonder to a Workday to a Salesforce with mainframe and mobile. We can do that in one test flow very visually with Tosca and with no coding. And you're going to see Tricentis test automation expand in capability to fulfill that same mission just in a SaaS model as well. And we're seeing tremendous market feedback on that. For the administrators and the dev teams that work just within Salesforce and ServiceNow, we offer our TTA products that we just discussed. And for Testum, that again is aimed at the Selenium puppeteer market, people who are very comfortable in code. And you can see the IT outcomes here on the right: speed and stability, rapid change, reliability, and business risk and cost. And I really want to go back to reliability, business risk, and cost. If you talk to CIOs about what all of their core missions, all their core initiatives are tied to, it all comes down to those three metrics: increasing speed, increasing the rate of change so we can get to market, but de-risking that at the same time and hence reducing cost. So we have built this entire automation ecosystem into one platform so that you can move from point testing to true continuous testing across the board.
Thank you, Bill and Jay. That was an insightful session for us. I absolutely enjoyed and hope our audience have also. Now, We have got a few questions from our audience. We'll go ahead and take some time for questions now. So the first question is, to test Salesforce, does Tricentis recommend Tosca or TTA?
Oh, fantastic question. I would say it depends on if you're testing Salesforce in isolation by itself, or you're testing Salesforce as it integrates with other systems. So for instance, an SAP system might be used to process an order, and then it feeds directly into a Salesforce system in order to update customer information. For that use case, you would want to use Tosca. In fact, Tosca does have some accelerator capabilities built in specific to Salesforce. If you aim Tosca at a Salesforce environment, it'll auto-generate a lot of the models that you need to start testing. But if you're just testing Salesforce in isolation and you're dealing with administrators or Salesforce developers that are only looking at the Salesforce environment, that's where TTA for Salesforce really shines. And you can, of course, have both in the same environment, because sometimes they're running on different release cycles as well. The Salesforce people may not be liaising with the Center of Excellence people when they're doing their changes in their releases, whereas Center of Excellence has to look at, well, if SAP changes, I still need to go in and test Salesforce, even if nothing changed in Salesforce, because I need to know that that integration did not break. So it comes down to, are you doing end-to-end testing, and who are the personas you're dealing with? And we offer options for both.
Thank you, Bill, for answering that. And next we have, can automated tests developed using all of the tools discussed today be managed using Qtest?
Oh, another fantastic question. 100% yes. One of the things I love about Qtest is not only can you manage everything we discussed today, you can also manage open source tooling or even some of our competitors' automation tooling. We can literally run our competitors' automation from Qtest as well through our Pulse and other frameworks there in Launch Framework, Pulse and Launch Framework. So there's literally almost no automation that Qtest can't manage, and that allows you to bring all those results back into one centralized repository where you can get true holistic status, both at a macro and micro level, on where my testing effort stands. I can see across the board, and it doesn't even matter what the SDLC is, because Qtest is flexible enough to handle them all. So now we really get a feel for where we stand from a quality perspective, both down at the tactical and all the way up to a strategic level.
Thank you for the insights, Bill. So the next question is the size of the company a factor in deciding whether or not Tosca will be a good fit?
So yeah, you saw a slide probably that alluded to different size companies. And although I would say no, not necessarily, there are some economic realities when you're dealing with very, very small organizations or startups. A lot of times they may not be able to budget for enterprise tooling licensing. Out of necessity, they may immediately default to open source, especially if they're doing web-only development. It makes sense. And then they can leverage their developers' skill sets to help create the tests. Now, what are the downfalls of that? Jay hit on a few of those when he talked about total cost of ownership. The maintenance challenge is still there with Selenium. Also, if your developers are dividing their time between creating the application and creating the tests and trying to keep both in sync, especially as your test coverage grows, imagine that. You're building a secondary code base and test a primary code base. So there are challenges that even small, medium-sized businesses are going to run into. But that's just an economic reality that certain businesses aren't going to necessarily seek out enterprise licensing for their tooling. It's just something to be aware of in the sales cycle. But I can tell you that we have sold Tosca to companies of every size, shape, and form. But if the driving part is you're going to need to be testing an SAP, an Oracle, et cetera, obviously not every company has that either. So always look for the applications under test, the applications that are being run by the organization, and that'll help direct you appropriately.
Thank you so much, Bill. So before closing, Jay, would you like to share a few words?
Thank you, Sindhu, and thank you, Bill. That was outstanding. it really simplified the whole question, or the answer to the question of how to choose the right solution from the Tricentis ecosystem. So, like I said in the beginning, organizations have varying needs. Their situations are different, and there are many stakeholders for testing. There are many roles in the organization that have different expectations and different ways of interacting with the testing process or participating in it. And so it's really important for a producer of testing technologies to be able to cater to all these various needs and constraints, and to cater to the needs and expectations of such a disparate group of stakeholders. And it's great to see how Tricentis has built exactly such an ecosystem. And I do hope that the participants in this webinar today, all of you, would have benefited from this deep dive into the selection process. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We appreciate you being here. I'm afraid due to time constraints, we will only be able to take these many questions at the moment. We will soon connect you over an email to answer the remaining questions. Thank you once again and have a great day.